everybody, my name is Brittany with Mainstream Multimedia, and in today's video, I'm going to be going over 5 reasons why your product pictures might not be improving. If you're someone who feels like your product pictures are a little dull, lackluster even, maybe flat, then this video is just for you. We're going to start off by going over some simpler tips and moving into some more advanced techniques you can use. Whether you're using a phone or a DSLR camera, you can apply most of these tips and tricks to your photography. The very first thing you can do, and the easiest of all of these, is separating your subject from the background. And what I mean by this, unless it's intentional, you should take your subject and move it as far away as you can. This allows light to pass between your backdrop and your subject, creating dimension and a really nice depth that's going to crispen the edges of your subject. If you have a bottle of face serum right up against a backdrop, it tends to blend and kind of become one, resulting in a very flat image. What makes a high-end image so nice is the depth and the crispness. And everything you do should be intentional, even the positioning of your subject. This leads us into the next topic, which is your lighting. Lighting is so important, more so than editing itself. Lighting controls how high-end or how affordable a product can look. I myself have been guilty of this mistake, shining the light directly on your subject from the front. This creates no room for any kind of depth or dimension. When I used to take my pictures, I thought that the only way to get those bright images with that sharp shadow that you see trending all over social media was to shine the light directly on the product and give it a nice, harsh look. That is wrong. I now take the light and move it next to the product and sometimes even behind the product. This helps to better paint the highlights and the shadows on your subject, giving it shape and more life. You can really enhance an image and make it look more dramatic and more expensive just based off the positioning of your light source. Another way to add dimension is by adding a light behind your subject. Illuminate the background to truly separate it from what it is you're trying to photograph. Another way to drastically improve the quality of your images is to shoot using a tripod over shooting handheld. I know handheld can be very tempting because you have more mobility when you're shooting and it's so much quicker than fumbling with a flimsy old tripod that never wants to sit level. However, in doing so, you're actually hurting the quality of your pictures. To the naked eye, you might not be able to see any extra movement added into your images, but when you zoom in, you're losing a lot of quality and introducing a lot more blur to your photos. You're also not using your camera to its maximum potential, and odds are you're using a lot of auto settings, which is a big fat no. You should be using a tripod and shooting in manual focus. This makes sure that there's no room for error and you know 100% that your product is in focus because you triple checked it. This also leads us into the 2 most important settings, which is ISO and shutter speed. ISO is your camera's sensitivity to light. The higher you crank your ISO, the brighter your image gets, and the lower you crank it, the darker your image gets. This is a great quick fix when you're trying to find a shortcut to quickly bring your lighting up. However, as you increase your ISO, you're introducing a lot of noise into your image, which is that very unflattering, grainy look, which is a big fat no, once again. The best way to allow more light into your camera without compromising with the additional noise is to drop your camera's shutter speed. Now, what is your shutter speed? This is how long your camera's shutter is open, exposing its sensor to light. Think of it as a window. If the window's snapping really fast, you're not allowing a lot of light to come in, but because it's snapping fast, you can capture a lot of movement. So if you're taking water shots or some shot that has some kind of movement, you want a fast shutter speed. But in a basic product picture, there's no need for that. So you have the option to make your window stay open for a longer period of time, allowing the max amount of light to come into your photos. Now, if your window's open for this long and you shake because you're doing handheld, you're going to introduce a lot of blur and it will definitely be noticeable in your pictures, which is why a tripod is so essential. For us in our studio, we like to keep our ISO between 100 and 300. And if this is your first time truly understanding ISO, that number probably sounds ridiculous to you. I used to shoot at upwards of 2000 plus ISO. And here's what my images used to look like. Here's what they look like shooting at 1 to 300 ISO. The difference is amazing. Now, when it comes to the shutter speed, there's not a set number to use. This is all going to depend on what your lighting situation is like. So I recommend starting by setting your ISO between 100 and 300, and then seeing how low you have to drop your shutter speed. Again, if you're using continuous light and you're using a tripod, it does not matter how low you drop your shutter speed as long as there's no movement in your shot. So you can max out your camera and be totally okay. Just remember, if you bump the ISO up, you will introduce noise. Now, to throw another wrench in this whole mathematical equation, aperture also affects light. This is that f-stop number that you see. This is going to be how blurred or how focused everything in your shot is. Right now, our f-stop is pretty low at a whopping 2.8. Because this room is so dark, by dropping the aperture, we were able to allow even more light into the image. Now, if you don't want a blurred image, then don't drop your f-stop. But it is a way to help introduce more light into your shot without having to mess with the ISO.
She's looking right at me.
And that wraps up today's video. And that wraps up today's video on 5 reasons why your product photography pictures may not be improving. Just to recap, your subject might be too close to the backdrop. Your light source might be too direct, too harsh, resulting in a very flat, dull image. And you're probably not using a tripod. And if you are, you possibly aren't utilizing your camera to its maximum potential, aka understanding how ISO, shutter speed, and the f-stop all work together to create very crisp, high-end images straight out of camera. If you found any value at all in this video, please give it a giant thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next video.